You said to one of our researchers that this career that we just look back and all of those incredible moments that you've had in your life, and they really, really are, was down to a little bit of luck at the very beginning. And
oh, absolutely, I think. But I do think luck comes several times in everybody's life. All you have to do is grab
hold of it.
In 1993, Hollywood legend Leslie Caron swallowed a handful of pills with alcohol and waited to die. The star who danced with Gene Kelly and won the hearts of millions was broken, alone, and ready to end it all. Nobody knew her pain. Nobody saw how bad things had gotten. From starving during World War II to watching her mother kill herself, Leslie's glamorous life hid a lifetime of suffering that finally became too much to bear. Today, we reveal the heartbreaking truth behind the smile that fooled the world.
I had very decisive views on how I wanted to look.
You did and do.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed.
I did not want to look like the girls of the day who were absolutely like poodles with just curls.
The 50s, sure. Yeah.
Leslie Caron was born on July 1st, 1931, in Boulogne-sur-Seine, France. Her father, Claude Caron, was a chemist and perfumer. Her mother, Margaret Petit, had been a Broadway dancer in the 1920s. Their worlds could not have been more different. Her father was analytical and precise. Her mother was artistic and ambitious. This mix of science and creativity shaped Leslie from the start. The Carons lived in luxury. Their townhouse in Neuilly-sur-Seine had a butler, a chef, a chauffeur, a governess, and multiple maids. Summers were spent at a countryside estate in the Pyrenees. But behind the wealth, there was pressure. Margaret had grown up poor and believed ballet was the key to success. She saw it as a way for Leslie to secure a future, maybe even marry into royalty. For Leslie, childhood was not about play. It was about discipline. She practiced constantly, pushed by a mother who saw failure as unacceptable. Leslie often felt emotionally neglected. Her mother was focused on results, not feelings. She overheard her grandfather once scolding her mother for pushing too hard. His words stayed with her for years. "Margaret, you want your daughter to be a whore." He believed her mother cared more about status than about Leslie's happiness. Then, everything changed. When World War II reached France, the Carons lost almost everything. The family's wealth disappeared overnight. They went from living in luxury to struggling for survival. Winters were brutal. Leslie went to bed fully dressed because there was no heat. Food was scarce. Some nights, they survived on potato peels. The city around them became colder, not just from the lack of warmth, but from fear. Parisians stopped trusting each other. No one helped. No one even gave directions when asked. Leslie noticed her Jewish neighbors disappearing. They had once worn yellow stars. Now, they were simply gone. Her family never spoke about it. Her mother fell into depression. She drank to escape the reality of their new life. The war had stolen everything: her wealth, her dreams, her hope for the future. Years later, at 67, she took her own life. But even in the hardest years, she held on to one thing: ballet. It was the only way forward. At 11, Leslie began training at the National Conservatory of Dance in Paris. She had real talent. By 14, she performed in The Pearl Diver, playing a boy. At 16, she joined the Ballet des Champs-Élysées, a company founded in 1945 by choreographer Roland Petit. This was no ordinary dance troupe. It was a place where ballet met innovation, drawing in creative minds like writer Jean Cocteau, and composer Joseph Cosma. Caron wasn't just another dancer. She quickly earned solo roles, proving her skill and presence on stage. Performing with the company was both exciting and demanding. Caron trained hard, mastering routines that required technical precision and emotional depth. But life off stage wasn't easy. She had lived through World War II and suffered from malnutrition, leaving her physically weak. Despite this, she poured everything into her dancing. The post-war years in France were a time of artistic renewal, and Caron's performances reflected that spirit. What she didn't know was that one of those performances would change her life forever. In 1950, Gene Kelly attended a Ballet des Champs-Élysées show in Paris. He was searching for a new leading lady for An American in Paris, 1951, after Sid Charisse had to drop out due to pregnancy. When he saw Caron on stage, he knew he had found someone special. She had no acting experience, but that didn't matter. Kelly saw grace, charm, and something fresh. Within days, Caron was on a plane to Hollywood. Moving to California was a shock. Caron had spent her teenage years in an occupied city, surrounded by fear and hardship. Hollywood was the opposite: sunshine, warmth, and abundance. She later recalled being overwhelmed by something as simple as seeing a plate full of food. But adjusting wasn't easy. She arrived in poor health, weakened from years of scarcity. The long filming hours were exhausting. To make things worse, she caught mononucleosis during production. The studio wanted to replace her, but Kelly fought for her. He convinced MGM to let her work every other day while she recovered. The hard work paid off. An American in Paris won 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. The film's climactic ballet sequence, lasting 17 minutes and choreographed by Kelly, became one of the most iconic dance scenes in history. Caron had gone from a Parisian ballet stage to starring in one of Hollywood's greatest musicals. With that success, MGM signed her to a 7-year contract, launching her film career. But Hollywood had its own challenges. Caron had to adapt not just to acting, but to the pressures placed on women in the industry. Malnutrition had left her fragile, and working long hours on cement studio floors made things worse. Determined to regain her strength, she studied nutrition and developed healthy habits, changes she credited for her long-lasting health. Despite everything, Hollywood gave her opportunities she might never have had in France. In post-war Europe, women still faced rigid expectations, limiting their choices. Hollywood wasn't perfect, but it allowed her to shape her own career. Leslie Caron's big moment came in 1953 when she starred in Lily. This was more than just another role. It was the one that made Hollywood see her as a true actress, not just a dancer. She played Lily Dorier, a young orphan who finds comfort in a carnival puppeteer and his puppets. The film, directed by Charles Walters, was based on Paul Gallico's short story, The Man Who Hated People. Caron's performance was raw and emotional, capturing both innocence and deep longing. Audiences fell in love with her, and critics took notice. She earned her first Academy Award nomination for Best Actress, won a BAFTA for Best Foreign Actress, and received a Golden Globe nomination. A big reason Lily stood out was how it used puppetry. Each puppet represented a different side of human nature, and through them, Lily learned about herself. The film's dreamlike sequences gave Caron a chance to use her ballet background in a way that felt magical. One moment, she was a lost girl. The next, she was dancing with life-sized puppets, moving between fantasy and reality. It was a performance unlike anything else at the time. The film's success was undeniable. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Score and premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 1953. But more than that, It changed Caron's career. Before this, she was seen as a dancer who could act. After Lily, she was a leading actress. She had proved herself. 2 years later, she starred opposite Fred Astaire in Daddy Long Legs, 1955. This time, she played another orphaned French girl, one whose education is secretly funded by a wealthy American, played by Astaire. He personally chose Caron for the role after admiring her work in An American in Paris, 1951. This film was different from anything she had done before. It was Astaire's first CinemaScope production, meaning the choreography had to be adapted for the wider screen. Their dance numbers blended ballet with jazz, especially in the famous Daydream sequence. Filming wasn't easy for Astaire. His wife had just passed away, and he was grieving. But he remained professional, never letting his emotions affect his performance. Caron later described him as adorable and admired how he made dancing look effortless. Their chemistry on screen made the film unforgettable. Then came Gigi, 1958, one of MGM's greatest musicals. Directed by Vincente Minnelli, it won 9 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. The story, set in Belle Époque Paris, followed a young girl being trained to become a courtesan until she chooses love instead. Caron played Gigi opposite Louis Jourdan as Gaston Lachelle. Their performances brought warmth and humor to a film that could have felt outdated in the wrong hands. Caron wasn't just the star of Gigi. She had read Colette's novella years before and was the one who suggested it be adapted into a film. She also worked closely with costume designer Cecil Beaton, helping shape the film's most iconic look, the white gown with bird-like details. Every part of the film reflected her influence. One thing that set Caron apart from most actresses of her time was the company she kept on the dance floor. She was one of only 6 actresses in history to dance on screen with both Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire. Kelly discovered her in Paris while she was performing with Roland Petit's Ballet des Champs-Élysées. He cast her in An American in Paris, 1951, which won 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Their 17-minute ballet sequence, set to George Gershwin's music, became one of the most famous dance numbers ever filmed. Kelly, known for his athletic style, gave Caron the nickname Lester the Pester because of how determined she was during rehearsals. He respected her work ethic, even if they approached dance differently. Dancing with Astaire in Daddy Long Legs was a completely different experience. Unlike Kelly, who was grounded and powerful, Astaire was light and smooth. Caron had to adjust her style, but she did it flawlessly. She later said that Astaire made dancing feel effortless, even though every step was carefully planned. Years later, she had a chance to dance with 2 other legends, Rudolf Nureyev and Mikhail Baryshnikov. It was just a brief moment at a charity event at the Metropolitan Opera House, but she described it as absolutely wild. Not many performers can say they danced with Kelly, Astaire, Nureyev, and Baryshnikov. Caron could. Despite all her success in musicals, Caron eventually felt trapped by them. She wanted to take on serious roles, ones that gave her a chance to show deeper emotions. To make that transition, she studied Stanislavski's method acting. This technique focused on drawing from real experiences to make performances feel more authentic. It was the opposite of what she had been doing in musicals, where movement and style mattered more than emotional depth. Meanwhile, Leslie Caron was just 20 when she married Geordie Hormel in 1951. He was the heir to the Hormel Foods fortune, the company best known for Spam. Their wedding took place in Las Vegas, a city she later described as grotesque. She remembered the flashing lights, the endless rows of slot machines, and elderly women gambling for hours without rest. It wasn't the dream wedding she had imagined. Looking back, she called it her childhood marriage. She had been raised in a conservative home and arrived in Hollywood as what she described as a virgin princess. She believed in waiting until marriage, but once she was married, reality felt nothing like the romantic future she had expected. The life she stepped into was cold and disappointing. Even the idea of marrying into money turned out to be an illusion. Despite his famous last name, Hormel was not as wealthy as people assumed. Caron later claimed she was the one supporting him. On top of that, Hormel had an eccentric personality and would go on to marry 3 more times. By 1955, their marriage was over. It was a painful lesson for Caron, a reminder that a glamorous life on the surface could hide something much darker underneath. But leaving Hormel wasn't the end of the trouble. Their divorce became a messy public spectacle. Caron moved to New York to focus on dancing while rumors spread about Hormel's drug addiction. During the divorce, his legal team accused her of infidelity in an attempt to avoid paying alimony. The claims were false, but they added to the emotional strain. She kept her dignity in public, but behind closed doors, the ordeal was exhausting. Hormel was no stranger to scandal. He had inherited $13 million, but financial disputes followed him for years. The divorce was just another storm in his chaotic life. It was finalized in 1955, and for Caron, it marked the end of a deeply disappointing chapter. She had seen the harsh realities behind fame and wealth, but she was determined to move forward. In 1956, she married Peter Hall, a rising theater director who would later become one of Britain's most respected cultural figures. Their marriage seemed promising, and they had 2 children, Christopher in 1957 and Jennifer in 1958. But trouble began early. Caron had already made a major sacrifice by breaking her MGM contract to move to London with Hall. But even that wasn't enough to create a happy home. Hall believed in strict traditional roles. He expected her to prioritize family over her career, but she wasn't willing to give up her passion. She loved being a mother, but she also needed the freedom to work. Then came the final blow. Hall had an affair with actress Diana Rigg, and when the news became public, their marriage collapsed. The betrayal shattered Caron. They divorced in 1965, and even years later, she blamed herself for not fighting harder to fix things. But there was no going back. Despite the heartbreak, she refused to let it define her. She had her children, and she still had her career, which she had fought to keep alive through every personal setback. No matter how painful the past had been, she kept moving forward. Leslie Caron had already charmed audiences with her elegance in musicals like Gigi and An American in Paris. But in 1962, she took a bold step in a completely different direction. The L-shaped room changed everything. Directed by Brian Forbes, the film followed Jane Fawcett, a young unmarried French woman living in a rundown London boarding house. She was pregnant, alone, and facing judgment from society. Caron brought depth and vulnerability to the role, showing a woman struggling with isolation while finding quiet strength. The film tackled subjects that were rarely explored at the time, including abortion and single motherhood. It also featured a diverse cast of characters, immigrants, queer individuals, and outcasts, giving the story a level of realism that stood out in early 1960s cinema. Critics praised Caron for her raw and powerful performance. This was nothing like the wide-eyed ingenue she had played in Gigi. This was a woman facing real hardships, and Caron made every emotion feel authentic. Her work in the L-shaped room earned her a Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Motion Picture, Drama, a BAFTA for Best British Actress, and an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. She lost the Oscar to Anne Bancroft for The Miracle Worker, but the film had already solidified her reputation as a serious dramatic actress. Caron later admitted that this role allowed her to break free from the musicals she had grown tired of. She called them futile and silly, compared to the depth of The L-Shaped Room. The film became a key part of the British New Wave movement, which focused on social realism and working-class struggles. More importantly, it gave Caron the chance to prove she could take on dramatic roles that felt true to life. She didn't stop there. In 1964, she starred in Father Goose, a romantic comedy set during World War II. This time, she played Catherine Frenot, a prim schoolteacher stranded on an island with a group of students. Her co-star was Cary Grant, and their contrasting personalities made for a charming on-screen dynamic. The film's light-hearted tone was a major shift from The L-Shaped Room, but Caron handled the transition with ease. Her comedic timing was sharp, and the film became a hit, even winning the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. 13 years later, she took on an entirely different challenge in Valentino, 1977, Ken Russell's biographical drama about silent film legend Rudolph Valentino. She played Alla Nazimova, a flamboyant and controversial actress who had been a force in early Hollywood. The film itself received mixed reviews. Some admired its daring style, while others thought it was too exaggerated. But Caron's performance stood out. She fully embraced Nazimova's larger-than-life personality, proving once again that she could transform herself completely for a role. Despite her success in Hollywood, Caron's return to France in the early 1970s did not go as she had hoped. She had achieved international fame, yet back home, she struggled to find acceptance. French audiences didn't see her as fully French, nor did they view her as a foreign star. She found herself in an odd position, neither embraced nor entirely rejected. Looking back, Caron called her return a 40-year mistake. She had expected to continue her career in French cinema, but roles were scarce. She believed French filmmakers resented her Hollywood success and saw her as an outsider. Even though France welcomed British and American stars, they struggled to accept someone who had represented French culture on an international stage while building her career elsewhere. She did manage to appear in The Man Who Loved Women, 1977, a film by François Truffaut, but opportunities remained limited. Frustrated, she spoke openly about how she felt punished for her success abroad. The rejection stung, but she refused to let it define her. Instead, she found work in French theater and television while continuing to take roles in international films. She never stopped acting, no matter how difficult the journey became. Leslie Caron's life looked like a dream from the outside. She was a graceful dancer, a Hollywood star, and a woman who seemed to have it all. But behind the beauty was a story filled with pain, loss, and battles she fought in silence. By the 1980s, she was drinking heavily, using alcohol to numb the pain. Then, in 1993, everything reached a breaking point. She was running an inn in Burgundy, France, hoping for a fresh start. But instead, it became another burden. Financial troubles and loneliness took their toll. One night, overwhelmed by despair, she swallowed a handful of pills and washed them down with alcohol. She later described it as a gamble. She wasn't sure if she even wanted to wake up, but she did. She spent a month in the hospital, recovering not just from the overdose, but from years of emotional pain. It was the turning point she needed. After surviving, she sought help through therapy and Alcoholics Anonymous. She later said both had saved her life. Drinking had only made her depression worse, clouding her judgment and deepening her pain. AA gave her something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging. Her struggles ran deeper than addiction. The pain had started long before. Her mother, Margaret Petit, had battled depression and alcoholism for years. In 1982, when she was 67, she took her own life. That loss stayed with Caron, shaping her in ways she didn't fully understand until much later. Therapy became a way to untangle the past. She had spent years trying to move forward without facing what had happened, but that approach had only led her here. Therapy forced her to stop running. In 2009, she took another step toward healing when she released her memoir, Thank Heaven. It was more than just a book. Writing became a way to process everything she had been through. She revisited the highs and lows of her life, from her childhood in war-torn France to her rise as an MGM star. She also wrote about the dark times, her struggles with depression, her mother's death, and the impact of toxic relationships. Putting those memories on paper was painful, but it also gave her freedom. She later described it as cutting ties with the past. The memoir also gave her a chance to set the record straight. For years, rumors had followed her. Some claimed she had stolen roles or manipulated her way through Hollywood. She used Thank Heaven to tell the truth. She wasn't trying to change the past, just to be honest about it. In 2007, Leslie Caron made a stunning return to the spotlight. She won a Primetime Emmy Award for her guest role on Law & Order, Special Victims Unit, proving that even after decades in the industry, she still had the power to captivate audiences. She played Lorraine Delmas, a rape survivor whose case was reopened after many years. The story was inspired by real-life cases where justice had been delayed for too long. Caron's performance in the episode Recall was heartbreaking and powerful. She showed the pain of a woman haunted by the past, but determined to seek justice. Critics praised her ability to bring raw emotion to the role. When she won the Emmy for Outstanding Guest Actress in a Drama Series, it was a rare achievement. Few stars from Hollywood's golden age had managed to transition so successfully into modern television. This win proved that talent like hers could never fade. Caron's return to film in the early 2000s was just as impressive. In Chocolat, 2000, she played Madame Odell, a widow in a small French town during the 1950s. The film, starring Juliette Binoche and Johnny Depp, was about breaking free from rigid traditions. Caron's character represented quiet rebellion against societal expectations. Then, in Le Divorce, 2003, she played Suzanne de Persson, the sophisticated matriarch of a wealthy French family. The film featured Kate Hudson and Naomi Watts and explored the clash between American and French culture. Caron's performance stood out for its elegance and wit. These roles showed that she could adapt to modern cinema without losing the grace that had defined her earlier career. Even in her 70s, Caron was still taking on challenging roles. In February 2010, she performed in A Little Night Music at Paris's Théâtre du Châtelet. She played Madame Armfeldt, a character filled with wisdom and regret. The production, inspired by Gustav Klimt's artwork, received critical acclaim. Caron shared the stage with Greta Scacchi and Lambert Wilson, delivering a performance that was both commanding and deeply moving. She proved once again that she was more than just a dancer or a musical star. She was a true actress, capable of bringing depth to any role. Her personal life also drew attention, especially in the 1960s, when she had a highly publicized affair with Warren Beatty. At the time, Beatty was rising to fame, and their relationship quickly became the talk of Hollywood. They lived at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, attended glamorous parties, and seemed like the perfect couple. But behind the scenes, tensions grew. Beatty proposed multiple times, but Caron always refused. She later revealed that he had a controlling nature and constantly sought validation from those around him. He even compared her to his sister, Shirley MacLaine. Caron, who valued her privacy, struggled with Beatty's need for constant attention. Eventually, they went their separate ways, though they remained cordial over the years. Caron was never afraid to speak her mind, especially about Hollywood's treatment of actors. During her years at MGM, she openly criticized the studio for limiting dancers to one type of role. As the star of musicals like An American in Paris, 1951, and Gigi, 1958, she felt frustrated by how the industry saw her. She once called musicals futile and silly, despite their success. Determined to break free from that image, she studied the Stanislavski method of acting in the 1960s. This helped her land more serious roles, like the one in The L-Shaped Room, 1962. Her criticism of MGM reflected a larger problem in Hollywood. Many performers found themselves trapped in certain roles, unable to explore their full potential. Even Gigi, one of Caron's most famous films, had its share of controversy. Behind the glamorous costumes and charming songs, the story had a darker theme. The film followed Gigi, a young girl trained by her relatives to become a courtesan before ultimately marrying a wealthy man. When the film was released in 1958, audiences saw it as a light-hearted romance. But in later years, critics began to question the way it portrayed young women and arranged relationships. Caron herself admitted in later interviews that some aspects of the story were difficult to portray. What once seemed like an innocent musical had taken on a more complicated meaning over time. Through all of this, Leslie Caron remained a true artist. She refused to be defined by one era or one type of role. From dazzling audiences in classic MGM musicals to delivering unforgettable performances in modern films and television, she proved that talent and dedication could last a lifetime. Her career was filled with reinvention, and she never stopped challenging herself.